today's video we're going to be having the conversation about whether it's better or whether it's more profitable to be an Airbnb host or to actually have a long-term rental. So hey, my name is Jaydah and I'm a landlord. I own a 1-bedroom apartment in Kingston, Jamaica, and I've actually spent 6 months as an Airbnb host and I've spent 6 months as a landlord. So in today's video we're going to be comparing the two as to what makes more sense to actually have a short-term rental or a long-term rental. These are just my humble opinions. I'm not a financial advisor, I'm not a real estate agent, I don't even have a degree. This is literally just me sharing my experience as to how I found both, I'm going to be giving you guys the pros and cons as to what comes with having a short-term rental and also the advantages and disadvantages of having a long-term rental. So if you are new here and you haven't already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and like this video if you want to learn something new. So if you are literally new to the property game, let me just give you a brief introduction as to what Airbnb is. So essentially Airbnb is a online marketplace in which you can list, so you can provide your home, you can provide a spare bedroom, you can provide a unique space such as a boat, a bus. So while you're hosting your guests, obviously you make money as any hotel would by charging them a fee. It could also be broken down further into cleaning fees, into booking fees, into deposits, for example. And the way in which Airbnb makes their money is that they actually charge you a percentage and they also charge the guest a percentage of what they're paying to stay at the place. So with long-term rentals, it's essentially you just becoming a landlord or you just renting out your space for longer periods of time, over that be 6 months, a year, 2 years, but the usual lease time is definitely 1 year, so that's 12 rolling months. So no, my opinion is that there is pros and cons to both of them. So there's advantages and disadvantages with being an Airbnb host, and there's advantages and disadvantages with being a landlord. I'm going to break down some of the pros and the cons for both sides, and then we're gonna have the conversation where we compare the two. So with Airbnb, let's start with my favorite one. Like personally, like literally just chit chat, I prefer being an Airbnb host because I love being hospitable. I love meeting new people. I love hosting. I love accommodating people. I love making people feel welcomed, and I really did enjoy being in that hospitality space. Also, I'm a regular frequent traveler, so I know what it means to find somewhere that is clean and safe to lay your head at night, and I literally took so much pride into that and just tried to provide the best possible experience for the guests that I hosted. I learned a lot along the journey, and I'm sure my Airbnb starring now is at 4.65, I believe, so we're almost a 5-star super host. Either way, let's delve right into it. So one of the major pro of owning an Airbnb is that the income is limitless. So to expand on that, Airbnb has a smart booking system which essentially prices your property based on the supply and demand at that specific period in time. So a brief example is that when I was hosting my Airbnb, I realized that in December periods our bookings would literally sky high, and Airbnb gave us the option as to whether we would like to list it a little bit cheaper, which is normally £50 a night, or a bit more expensive, which could range up to £60 or even £70 a night, depending on the supply and demand within the area. So with that being said, it means that you can literally charge someone based on how many Airbnbs are available in your city, in your area, in your parish, in that one specific night, and it is absolutely endless as to how many nights can be booked up. Obviously there's 30 days in a day, but you can have a booking every night, and if you want to be a bit more clever and have a little bit more income, then you can also have a sleeping bag or even a sofa bed and charge to have another guest and just expand your remit a bit more. So that's the pro of having the Airbnb. Like, you can make so much money, it's actually crazy, and you can clearly see why the platform is always growing and there's always more homes and more hosts going onto it. Another pro of being an Airbnb host or of having a short-term rental that can be listed on HomeAway, Booking.com, or Airbnb is that you also have access to the property, which means that if you are traveling, if you're within the area, then you are more than able to stay there. Whereas if you had leased or rented the property to a tenant, you wouldn't be able to just have regular access, wouldn't be able to stay at the property. So for me, when I was hosting and staying back in Jamaica, if the property was booked up from Monday to Friday, I would stay in the property from Saturday to Sunday just to get my money's worth and just to, you know, use up the space. And also with Airbnbs, if you are clever, when it is not booked out on Airbnb, you should definitely list it on multiple sites. And you can also use it for short-term rentals or major events. Also, if there are any other Airbnb hosts watching this video, do drop your location. Where's the Airbnb and how are you finding it? Do you prefer short-term rentals? Do you prefer long-term rental? Just piggybacking off what I said, this then is another pro, because it basically just means that whenever you have your properties listed on multiple sites, you have a higher growth potential. That means that you could have longer bookings. Someone could book your property for 1 month long. You could have a constant role, you could be in a constant role of guest. You can literally always have someone booked in, and that's a good thing because it exposes your property and it gives you reviews, and reviews turns into money. Another thing that I absolutely loved with being an Airbnb host is that you can have a controllable experience, which means that whenever you have a guest, so say for instance you have a guest called Apple, she stays in from Monday to Friday, but from Monday to Friday she has been an absolute nightmare. So she's been a nightmare to the neighbors, she's loitering the place, it's a lot of loud noises, there's parties, it's just a nightmare. At least you have the control as a host to either alert Airbnb and ask someone to evacuate the premises as soon as possible, or you could always take out a case and actually get compensation for the damages done. But essentially it's kind of in your control because you can always ask that person to leave, whereas it's not that straightforward whenever you're leasing a long-term property. Personally, I've never had to ask anyone to leave my Airbnb, but I have had a few nightmare guests, I won't lie to you. So now I'm going to do the comparison with long-term rentals. So with this one, as you guys know, with a long-term rental, like for my instance, I've just got tenants that I rent it out for, and usually, like I said before, leases range from about 6 months to about a year, which is usually the standard time. Please excuse my phone. One of the pros with having a long-term rental is that you have a predictable income, whereas with Airbnb, even though you can have a high earning income, it's not necessarily reliable because you're not always guaranteed to be booked out, especially when it's outside of peak season. Whereas if you have your tenants, you know that every single month you can look forward to that rent being paid, and if it's not being paid, then there are always actions that can be followed up to either evacuate the tenant or to take it to court so that you can be paid your money. And to be completely honest, like, that's one of the main reasons why I opted to go into long-term rentals as opposed to staying into short-term rentals, was that because with COVID, like, everything was literally so unpredictable, and it was just getting a lot, having to constantly pay my expenses and everything, and not be able to like count on certain expenses being covered by the property itself because it wasn't always being booked, and it was literally just so unpredictable, and I just can't anxiety, I can't. a pro with having a long-term rental is that it has, well, I don't know, this is debatable, but I think it has less wear and tear compared to having guests constantly coming in and out. Because I think that with Airbnb, like, people see it as a hotel, and there are some people that when they go to hotels, they like to trash it, they like to, you know, literally just leave it in an absolute mess. And people have that same mindset when it comes to Airbnbs. So that means that someone can literally trash your place in a night and then check out, and that's it. Whereas if you have tenants, like, they can still trash the place, but it's way less, it would be way less frequent, and also they live in it, so you would like to think that they would keep and care the place. Whereas with Airbnb host, it's literally just a weekend and then you're never seeing them again. I also wanted to mention these other pros that comes with having a long-term rental. The first one is that you have the privilege of choosing whether you're going to invest in furniture or whether you're not going to furnish the space. If you're not going to furnish the space, then right there and then you're already saving a whole load of money. And if you are choosing to furnish it, then it's usually, like, it's literally not even half of what you'd have to furnish if you had an Airbnb, because you normally just get like the main furnishing: stove, fridge, bed, washer. I think that's it. And whereas with Airbnb, like, the space literally has to be suitable for someone to live in it and have everything that they need to effectively go about their day-to-day. So I'm just going to quickly go through the cons. I hope that I'm explaining it so you guys can understand. But if you haven't already, please be sure to hit the subscribe button and like this video if you've learned anything. And if you haven't learned anything at all so far, leave your comments below and I'll be sure to reply to them, because I've learned. So some of the cons with having an Airbnb is that with one, well, in Jamaica, I'm going to speak about my experience. In one, there are, not to my knowledge, any legal law and registration around short-term rentals such as Airbnbs, home away stays, etc, etc. So that's a good and bad thing, because it means that you kind of can evade tax, but you don't have, I mean, I think there is a governing body, but it's not like prominent. That's a con for me. And also it could be a con for people that live in other parts of the world, like America. When I was doing my research, I know that in Los Angeles you're not actually allowed to have an Airbnb. That's just a rule there, that's a regulation there. I think different parts of LA, I think the south may be opening up to that now, but like usually you just can't open an Airbnb, and if you do, you will be fined and it will be shut down effective immediately. So that's a con with Airbnb. As I was saying, guys, hope you guys can hear me clearly, by the way. So as I was saying, yes, with you have to furnish it so that you can actively live in it, so that your guests can stay in it for however long they need and not need anything other than what's provided in the house, because it is usually a self-catering space or a B&B. So that means people literally need everything. And apart from stuff that you would use in your everyday life, you have to think of it as a hotel. So you really have to invest in toiletries, you have to invest in, sometimes you may have to even invest into property management if you have more than one listings, because it's a hectic job. Like, that's one thing, it's very hectic. And yeah, like, you have to just think about stuff like your linens always being ruined. That's what I experienced a lot. People would use the wrong chemical to wash it, so that means that either their clothes run on it or it will just get moldy if they don't hang it out to dry. And yeah, it's just a whole works. But you need money to do your furnishing properly, so that's a con with having Airbnb. Well, it can be a con if you don't have the money. And another con is that it requires a lot more management than a lot more everyday management than what a long-term rental is. And this can be, like I said before, if a property management company, you're going to have to consider paying cleaners if you're not the one cleaning it. You're going to have to consider having someone to check in and check out. That could be either a co-host or yourself, but essentially you need someone on the ground on the property every day to check in and check out your guests, or just to be there readily available if anything goes wrong. That being said, you guys can tell that Airbnbs are high maintenance, and that's in the physical sense and also in the mental sense, because you literally have guests constantly rolling in and rolling out, and you want to make sure that everyone has a great experience, because this will be reflected whenever they leave the property and they give you a review. You don't want a bad review, because that's what people look at to actually book and verify your property. But with Airbnb, it is highly expensive, because literally anything can happen at any given time, and that falls on you. And because you have a new guest every day, that means that a new problem can occur every day, because it's not the same person that you're dealing with right throughout. And you also have to budget to have wear and tear. If you have someone coming in every other day, then that means that your couch is going to be run down, the stove is going to be run down. So you have to budget to replace these items or to service them ever so often, just to make sure that your facility is running at a reputable standard. Some of the cons that I've experienced with having a long-term rental is that, for one, you obviously don't have access to it. So if I was to travel back home now, I wouldn't be able to stay in the apartment, and that, you know, that's a bit annoying. What we signed up for. Also with not having access to it, you also have to accept the fact that you're going to be having a lower income in comparison to how much you would actually make if you had it on a short-term listing site. Give me a minute, guys. And that's because when you do your contract with your tenants, you guys already agree your rent, and it's not, I don't know if it's not normal, but basically once you sign your contract with your tenants, you can't actually raise the rent until after that contract has expired and you're about to renew it or have a new tenant in. And even then, when you're about to raise it, you can't actually, I mean, you can, but it's not wise to raise it too high than the initial amount that you guys agreed. There's a lot of noise. Okay, I'm back now, guys. Sorry for the noise. So yeah, as I was saying, yeah, if you're about to raise your rent, you can't raise it too high than the initial amount that you guys agreed, because you don't want to scare your new tenant away, or you have to basically just prepare to find new ones. So in terms of income, I prefer the Airbnb income, but then, like I said, the stability thing was really getting to me when I was doing it in my last 3 months or so. Yeah, so yeah, you're definitely going to be affected by, not affected, so yeah, you definitely have to consider the less revenue that you'll be making when you actually have long-term tenants. Also, I'm going to leave you guys with this last con, and then we can continue the conversation in the comment section. But the last con with having a long-term rental, or rather listing your space for long-term rentals as opposed to short-term rentals, is that evictions aren't a walk in the park, meaning that it's a whole process. Sometimes it takes months, if not years, for you to actually have your tenants evicted. So say for instance your tenant hasn't paid the rent and you want to have them evicted, you can't just go to them and have them evicted. It's an actual process, because you guys signed a contract, and this can actually be taken to court. Sorry guys, I just got interrupted. I don't know where I left off, but I'm just going to continue. So as I was saying, with evictions, they aren't a walk in the park and they aren't a one-step process. It takes a long time, and this can be long-winded from months to years, depending on how bad your situation is. Not how bad, but it just depends on the circumstances surrounding your situation. So if your tenant isn't paying the rent and you want to have them evicted from the premises, just raise it on Airbnb and report them and ask them to come out of the property, or ask Airbnb or whoever to take them out of the property. There's a legal process that you have to go through, and sometimes the courts even get involved, and it can get tiring and it can get costly. And while you are doing this process, like the court process, the hearings, etc., the tenants may still not be paying you any rent, and that means they're not making no money. So yeah, evictions are a huge con with having, not even a con, it's just a huge risk with having long-term rentals. But what's life without risk? So in conclusion, guys, I don't think one outweighs the other. I think it boils down to your risk appetite, what you can take, and you also have to think about what's important to you. Whether you are becoming an Airbnb host because you actually enjoy being hospitable and hosting, and you enjoy traveling and meeting new people and being social and actually, you know, going out of your way to make your space welcoming for these people that you're inviting into your home. You have to think about the type of personality that you have. You have to think about the risks that are associated with it. You have to think about the expenses. You have to think about the contingency plan as to what will happen whether there's a flood and you have a guest. What will happen if your guests don't check in and you are banking on that money to pay the rent. You just have to think about all of these other things. And the same with becoming a landlord or having a long-term rental. You still have to weigh up the pros and cons and see what suits you, what you can actually manage. And it's completely fine to juggle the two. It's completely fine to go between the two, and it's completely fine to literally just trial out the two. That's what I'm doing at the moment. I did 6 months Airbnb and I completed 6 months as a landlord, and now I feel like I've had a good amount of experience to be able to make an informed decision as to what I want to do going forward. So if you guys have any more questions, do leave them in the comment section below. And if you have any video suggestions for this channel, do leave it in the comment section below as well. I hope you guys learned something from this video. If you did, don't forget to give us a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Okay, let's go.
Good night. What's that you have?
You're so pretty.
Thank you.
You live in?
Sadly.
Why sadly?
Because you live here as well.
Yeah, why? Why is that bad though? Why is that bad? Why is that bad?
I already know where the conversation's going.
Because you're gorgeous. Let's not say anything else. You're beautiful. You're actually beautiful. I'm not gonna lie to you. What floor do you live on? Number?
I would never tell you that.
I'm so what?
Okay, good for you.
I just wanna hug you.
No, you can't hug
so
me. No, you
gorgeous,
can't.
though.
Corona
Why?
though. Because Corona.
I don't have corona.
I don't know that.
How do you mean you don't know that?
I don't know that. How would I
Look
know?
at your teeth, everything. Beautiful, man.
I have to do a video quickly. Alright, cool. Thank you.